Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I wanted to make a quick video on one of the most common privilege escalation method on Linux, which is the exploiting a writable etc password file. So before we go and talk about the exploiting the etc password file, generally it's a good idea to have a good understanding of something before we go and exploit it. So let's quickly talk about what an etc password file is. So an etc password file, what it is, it basically stores the user account information, and it's a plain text file. Usually it's world readable, so anybody can read it, but it should only be writable by the root user. And we'll see a reason why that should be the case, right? So currently I'm sitting on one of the try hack me box, and what I've done is I've catted the etc password file to sort of show you what the file looks like. So as you can see, there is quite a bit of information here, but don't worry, we'll simplify all of that. All right, so etc password file, it basically stores one entry per line for each user, okay? And all of these fields, you probably have noticed that they're all separated by a colon, right? You've got a total of 7 fields here, and let's talk about what each of these fields means, right? So the first field here, you've got your username, so the username of the system, root, right? That's the account that we would like to compromise in order for us to say that yes, we've successfully escalated our privileges. Then the second field you've got is the password field, but you notice there's an X here. Well, X is not really the password of the root user. X basically indicates that the passwords are encrypted, and they're stored in a different file, which is called the etc shadow file. Okay. The next field after that is your user ID field, and generally root will get a user ID of 0, and then any of your other system accounts, for example your bin, sys, syncc, those will all get a user ID in between 1 to 99, and then any other account that are created manually later on in the system, those will get a user ID between 100 and 999. Okay. The next field you've got here is your group ID, and then which is followed by the name of the first name of the user. And if there was if somebody had entered their phone number, address, blah blah blah, you would also see those kind of information in here. The next field is the home directory of the user, and last but not least is the shell. Okay. So that's what each of these fields means in an etc password file. Right, now let's talk about exploiting it, right? So in order for us to exploit it, obviously there were 2 ways. If we could see the password of the user, we could have used something like hashcat and decrypted those passwords, and then we would be able to log in as that user. Or the second method is to actually add a new entry, and when we add a new entry, we just give the new user the group ID and the user ID of root user, which is user ID and group ID 0, right? So in this case, currently I'm logged in as user 3. So if we have a look at the entry for user 3, my user ID and group ID does not allow me to write to the file, right? So let's quickly just confirm that. So if I just check my permission, so as you can see here, so the file is owned by the root, all right? So root can read and write to it. Anybody who is a member of the root group can also read and write to the file, but everybody else, which is my user number 3, cannot write to the file. I can only read the file. But if you've noticed here, we've got another user here, user 7, who is actually a member of the group, of the root group, which in this case, if we change our user to user 7, then he or she will be able to write to this file. Okay, so let's do that. Now, in a normal scenario, you will have to do a lot more enumeration, and you will have to find the user ID, the password of the user 7, and then you would switch yourself as user 7, and then you will write to the file. But for the simplicity of this video, I already know the obviously user ID 7, but I already know the password of the user 7. All right, so now I'm logged in as user 7, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a new entry, because as I shown earlier, that user 7 is a member of the root group, and therefore he or user 7 should be able to add a new entry to the etc password file. All right, so obviously if you want to add a new entry, we will need to follow the format, right? And the format is, as we speak earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a user called privesc, and the password that I'm going to do is we actually need to use another tool called OpenSSL, and it's pretty simple. Like, you can just type whatever password that you want. For example, I want to generate a hash for password, say 12345. All right, so that's the hash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this hash, and let's add it here. Okay, so what I've basically done is I've copied one of these entry, and I've changed the fields that I really want. So I've changed the username. As you can see, I changed the password, and then I'm going to give that user an ID of 0, group ID of 0, and then I'm going to give that the home directory of root, and then that's our show, right? So if we copy this, let's copy that, and then basically what we're going to do is we're going to add that new entry, which is equivalent of adding a new user. Basically, that's what we're actually doing. And I don't want to overwrite on the file. I just want to add a new entry there. That's why I added the 2 greater than sign. And then where we want to add it, it's in the etc password. Okay. So it looked like it works. So let's just make sure that it works. So cat etc password, and then we should see a new entry in the file with the privesc user, which we just added, right? And there it is. That's the privesc user, and that's the hash that we just generated. So we know the password of that is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to escalate out. We're going to switch to that user, okay? And the password is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom, there we go. So now we are logged in as a super user, and in I think most of the CDFs, probably this would be the last step for you to escalate your privileges, and then you will be able to cat your the root.txt file, which is the last flag. And if we just quickly confirm, if I go and check my ID, there you go, I'm root user.